Last night, Fox News erupted as Jim Carrey unleashed a vicious tirade against Donald Trump's marriage, only to be met with a fiery rebuttal from White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. The clash spiraled into a brutal showdown, leaving the studio stunned. The tension was palpable as the cameras rolled on Fox News' primetime slot. The host, a seasoned anchor with a knack for stoking fiery debates, introduced the guests with a glint in his eye. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, sat poised, her sharp gaze fixed forward. Across from her was Jim Carrey, the actor known for his comedic roles, but increasingly vocal about his disdain for conservative politics. The stage was set for a confrontation that would dominate headlines. Carrey wasted no time. His voice dripped with venom as he launched into a blistering attack on Donald Trump. Trump's marriage to Melania is a sham, a cold transaction built on power and photo ops, he sneered. She's trapped in a gilded cage, forced to play the loyal wife while he parades around, oblivious to her misery. It's a marriage of convenience, nothing more, and everyone in America knows it. The audience gasped, some murmuring in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Carrey's words were calculated, fueled by a deep-seated hatred for Trump that had simmered for years. He leaned forward, his eyes wild with conviction, painting a picture of a fractured union that he claimed symbolized Trump's hollow leadership. Leavitt's expression remained steely, her fingers tightly clasped on the desk. The host prodded Carrey to elaborate, and he doubled down. Melania's silence speaks volumes. She's a prisoner to his ego, and Trump's too busy chasing headlines to notice. Their marriage is a lie, just like his promises to the American people. The studio buzzed with tension, the audience hanging on every word. Carrey's attack wasn't just personal. It was a direct challenge to the image of strength and unity Trump projected. Then Carrey turned his sights on Leavitt. His tone shifted to one of condescension, a smirk playing on his lips. "And you, Karoline? You're just a puppet, aren't you? A mouthpiece for a man who doesn't even know your name. You're out here defending a sinking ship, a nobody, trying to play somebody. Trump's got you on a leash, and you're too naive to see it." The words landed like a slap, and the audience erupted in a mix of boos and cheers. Carrey leaned back, satisfied, as if he'd exposed her as insignificant. The host raised an eyebrow, turning to Leavitt, clearly expecting her to buckle under the pressure. But Leavitt didn't flinch. Her eyes narrowed, and a quiet fire burned in her gaze. She adjusted her posture, sitting taller, and when she spoke, her voice was calm but razor-sharp. "Mr. Carrey, you're wrong about President Trump, about his marriage, and about me. Melania Trump is a strong, independent woman who stands by her husband because she believes in his vision for America, not because she's forced to. Their marriage is grounded in mutual respect, something you clearly know nothing about." The audience roared, some clapping, others shouting in dissent. Leavitt continued, undeterred. "As for me, I'm not here as anyone's puppet. I'm the voice of a president who fights for the American people every day, and I'm proud to serve in that role." Carrey's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but Leavitt pressed on, her confidence growing. "You come here with your Hollywood script, thinking you can tear down a man who's weathered more storms than you'll ever know. You're not exposing anything, Jim. You're just shouting into the void." The studio was electric now, the audience feeding off the intensity. Leavitt's words weren't just a defense. They were a declaration of her own strength, a young woman refusing to be dismissed. The host, sensing the escalating drama, leaned in, his voice smooth but eager. "Jim, what's your response to that? Karoline's calling you out." Carrey's face reddened, his composure slipping. He leaned forward, pointing a finger at Leavitt. "You're out of your depth, kid. You think you're tough because you've got a title? I've been fighting liars like Trump longer than you've been out of college." His voice rose, cracking with anger, and the audience gasped at the raw hostility. Leavitt's lips twitched into a faint smile, as if she'd expected this unraveling. The debate was spiraling, and the studio felt like a pressure cooker ready to burst. Carrey's personal attacks had backfired, and Leavitt's calm defiance was shifting the momentum. But Carrey wasn't done. He was gearing up for another outburst, and the night was far from over. The air crackled with hostility as Jim Carrey's eyes blazed, his fingers still jabbed toward Karoline Leavitt. The Fox News stage, bathed in harsh studio lights, felt like a gladiator's arena, with the audience's roars fueling the chaos. Leavitt's poised rebuttal had thrown Carrey off balance, but he was far from defeated. His voice, now a low growl, cut through the din. "You think you can sit there, parroting Trump's talking points and call it strength? You're a prop, Karoline, a shiny distraction for a failing administration." The words were venomous, designed to wound, and the crowd erupted, some jeering, others egging him on. Leavitt's jaw tightened, but her gaze didn't waver. She leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with steel. "If I'm a prop, Jim, then what are you? A washed-up actor chasing relevance by attacking a man who's actually leading. You're not fighting for truth. You're performing for applause." The audience exploded, a wave of cheers and boos crashing over the set. Leavitt's counterpunch landed hard, and Carrey's face twitched, his composure fraying further. The host, barely concealing his delight at the escalating drama, interjected, "Let's keep this civil, folks. Jim, she's calling your motives into question." "What's your answer?" Carrey scoffed, his hands slamming the desk. "My motives? I'm here because Trump's a fraud, and his marriage is just the tip of the iceberg. Melania's stuck in a loveless deal, propping up his image while he chases power. It's pathetic, and you're pathetic for defending it." His voice rose to a shout, spittle flying, and the audience gasped at the raw aggression. He turned back to Leavitt, his eyes narrowing. "You're not fooling anyone, Karoline. You're a kid playing dress-up, reading scripts written by Trump's cronies. You don't have a voice. You have a leash." The personal jab stung, and the crowd's reaction was a chaotic mix of outrage and excitement. Leavitt's expression hardened, but she didn't shrink. She took a measured breath, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You keep talking about leashes, Jim, but the only one tethered here is you, to your hatred. You're so obsessed with tearing down President Trump that you can't see the truth. Melania chose to stand by him, not because she's trapped, but because she believes in his fight for this country. And I'm here, not as a script reader, but as a woman who represents millions of Americans who trust his leadership." Her words were a rallying cry, and the audience roared, many leaping to their feet. Leavitt's confidence was unshakable, her youth belying a fierce resolve that was turning the tide. Carrey's face contorted, his anger boiling over. "You're delusional," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Trump's a con man, and you're his cheerleader. You think you're speaking for America? You're speaking for a cult." The accusation was a Molotov cocktail, igniting the studio. The host raised his hands, trying to restore order, but the crowd was too far gone, chanting and shouting. Leavitt, unfazed, leaned closer, her voice low but piercing. "Call it what you want, Jim, but the American people see through your tantrum. You're not exposing a cult. You're exposing your own bitterness." The host, sensing a breaking point, pivoted. "Karoline, let's talk policy. How does this tie to Trump's leadership?" But Carrey wasn't done. He interrupted, his voice a snarl. "Policy? She can't talk policy. She's a mouthpiece, not a thinker." The insult was desperate, a last-ditch effort to undermine her. Leavitt's eyes flashed with defiance. "I'll talk policy when you stop yelling, Jim, but you don't want a debate. You want a stage to vent your rage." The audience erupted again, and Carrey's hands shook, his frustration palpable. The confrontation was a runaway train, each exchange sharper than the last. Leavitt's calm authority was dismantling Carrey's bluster, but he was digging in, his anger pushing him toward a meltdown. The studio was a powder keg, and the next spark could set it ablaze. The Fox News set was a cauldron of raw energy, the audience's roars echoing like a storm. Jim Carrey's face was flushed, his fists clenched on the desk as he glared at Karoline Leavitt, whose unflinching calm only seemed to enrage him further. Her last retort had sliced through his bravado, and now he was teetering on the edge, his voice a ragged snarl. "You think you're clever, don't you? Hiding behind that polished smile, selling Trump's lies. You're not a leader. You're a follower, a nobody who got lucky." The words were a desperate lunge, meant to diminish her, but they landed like a misfired arrow. The crowd's reaction was a chaotic blend of jeers and shouts, some cheering Leavitt's resilience, others feeding off Carrey's fury. Leavitt's eyes glinted with resolve, her posture unyielding. She leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with an edge that silenced the room. "You keep calling me a nobody, Jim, but I'm not the one unraveling on live television. I'm here representing a president who's fought for this country, while you're just screaming about a marriage you know nothing about." The audience erupted, a wave of applause crashing over the set. Leavitt pressed on, her words precise. "You say Melania's trapped, but you're the one trapped by your own obsession with tearing down a man who's stronger than you'll ever be." Her defiance was electric, and the crowd fed off it, some chanting her name. Carrey's face twisted, his anger now a wildfire. He slammed his hand on the desk, the sound sharp against the chaos. "Stronger? Trump's a coward who hides behind people like you. His marriage is a joke, a publicity stunt to fool the gullible. Melania's just his prop, and you're no different." His voice cracked, the accusation veering into desperation. The host, sensing the spiraling intensity, tried to steer the conversation. "Jim, let's focus on the issues here. Karoline, how do you respond to these claims about the president's personal life?" But Carrey cut in, his eyes locked on Leavitt. "She can't respond. She's got nothing but rehearsed lines." Leavitt's lips curved into a faint, steely smile. "I've got plenty, Jim. Unlike you, I don't need to scream to make my point. You're attacking Melania Trump, a woman who stood by her husband, through relentless scrutiny, because it's easier than facing the truth. President Trump's leadership has delivered results, and that terrifies you." The audience roared, the energy tilting firmly in her favor. She continued, her voice rising with conviction. "I'm not here to play your game of insults. I'm here for the American people, and they see through your theatrics." The words were a gauntlet thrown, and the crowd's cheers drowned out Carrey's attempt to interrupt. Carrey's composure was gone, his hands trembling as he pointed at her. "You're a fraud, just like him. You think you're untouchable because you've got a title? You're nothing." The personal attack was a last gasp, and the audience gasped, the hostility palpable. Leavitt didn't blink. "If I'm nothing, Jim, why are you so afraid of me?" The question hung in the air, a quiet dagger that cut deeper than any shout. The studio exploded, the crowd on its feet, some shouting in support, others stunned by her audacity. The host, struggling to regain control, raised his voice. "All right, let's take a breath here. Karoline, you've been accused of being a mouthpiece. How do you define your role?" Leavitt seized the moment, her voice clear and commanding. "My role is to speak truth, to represent a president who fights for this country, and to call out people like Jim who'd rather tear it apart than build it up." The audience cheered wildly, and Carrey's face darkened, his rage barely contained. The confrontation was a high-wire act, each word a potential spark. Leavitt's unshakable poise was dismantling Carrey's onslaught, but his anger was a ticking bomb, ready to detonate. The stage was set for an explosive breaking point, and the night was hurtling toward it. The Fox News studio was a crucible, the air thick with the heat of clashing egos. Karoline Leavitt sat like a lighthouse in a storm, her calm defiance a stark contrast to Jim Carrey's unraveling fury. His eyes were wild, his voice a jagged edge as he leaned across the desk, spitting words like shrapnel. "You're a fraud, Karoline, just like your boss. You stand there pretending to be some patriot, but you're just a pawn in Trump's game." The accusation was a raw scream, and the audience gasped, the tension so thick it felt like the room might crack. Carrey's hands shook, his rage a live wire sparking with every syllable. Leavitt's gaze didn't falter, her voice cutting through the chaos with surgical precision. "You're wrong again, Jim. I'm not a pawn. I'm a voice for millions who believe in President Trump's vision. You're the one playing a role, shouting lies about a marriage you've never understood." The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of cheers and boos, some chanting, "Karoline!" Carrey's face twisted, his frustration boiling over. "Lies! Melania's miserable, stuck with a man who doesn't care. Their marriage is a facade, and you're too blind to see it." His voice cracked, the desperation clear as he doubled down on his attack. The host, his eyes gleaming with the drama, tried to steer the ship. "Jim, let's talk substance. Karoline, how do you address these personal attacks on the president?" But Leavitt seized the moment, her voice rising with quiet power. "I address them by calling them what they are: distractions. Melania Trump is a strong woman who's chosen her path, and President Trump is a leader who's delivered for this country. You, Jim, are just noise, trying to drown out the truth with your anger." The audience roared, the energy tilting decisively in her favor. Her words were a masterclass in control, each one landing like a hammer. Carrey's face was a mask of fury, his voice a snarl. "Noise? I'm the only one here telling it like it is. You're a kid, Karoline, a nobody who thinks she's somebody because Trump gave her a job." The insult was a desperate jab, but it backfired. The crowd jeered, and Leavitt's lips twitched into a steely smile. "If I'm a nobody, Jim, why are you losing this fight?" The question was a knockout punch, and the studio exploded, the audience on its feet. Carrey's hands slammed the desk, his voice a roar. "I'm not losing. You're nothing without Trump's script." Leavitt leaned forward, her voice low but lethal. "I don't need a script to know who I am or what I stand for. You, on the other hand, need this stage to feel relevant. You're not fighting for truth. You're fighting for attention." The crowd went wild, the cheers deafening. Carrey's eyes widened, his rage teetering into something unhinged. "You little—" he started, but the host cut in, his voice sharp. "Enough. Let's keep this respectful." But the damage was done. Carrey's outburst had exposed his unraveling, and Leavitt's poise was a beacon in the storm. The host pivoted, trying to regain control. "Karoline, let's talk about your role. How do you handle this kind of hostility?" Leavitt's response was immediate, her voice unwavering. "I handle it by staying focused on what matters. The American people, President Trump's leadership, and the truth. Jim's hostility is just a sideshow." The audience cheered, and Carrey's face darkened, his hands trembling as he muttered under his breath. He was a volcano ready to erupt, his anger no longer strategic but chaotic. The confrontation was a tightrope, and Leavitt was walking it with unshakable grace. Carrey's attacks were growing wilder, each one a misstep that cost him ground. The studio was a pressure cooker, the audience feeding off every jab, and Carrey's next move could either save him or seal his defeat. The Fox News stage was a battlefield, the audience's roars a deafening pulse as Jim Carrey's rage teetered on the brink of collapse. His eyes burned with desperation, his voice a hoarse rasp as he jabbed a finger at Karoline Leavitt. "You think you've won? You're nothing but Trump's lapdog, barking on command." The insult was a wild swing, but it landed hollow, the crowd jeering as Leavitt's serene confidence held firm. Her presence was a quiet storm, unraveling Carrey's bluster with every measured word. The host, sensing the endgame, leaned in, his voice sharp. "Jim, you've made your point. Karoline, your response?" Leavitt's gaze was unyielding, her voice clear and commanding. Jim, you've spent this entire night attacking me, President Trump, and his marriage to Melania. But all you've done is expose your own emptiness. I'm here for the American people, defending a leader who fights for them. You're just shouting into a void. The audience erupted, a tidal wave of cheers washing over the set. Leavitt pressed on, her words a crescendo. Melania Trump is a pillar of strength, not a victim. Their marriage is built on loyalty, something you can't comprehend because you're too busy tearing down what you don't understand. The crowd was on its feet, some chanting her name, the energy electric. Carrey's face contorted, his hands slamming the desk with a crack that echoed through the studio. Loyalty! It's a lie. Trump's a fraud, Melania's a prop, and you're a fool for buying it. His voice was a scream now, raw and unhinged, but the audience's boos drowned him out. His attacks, once sharp, were now frantic, each one a misfire that fueled Leavitt's ascent. She leaned forward, her voice cutting like a blade. The only fool here is the one who thinks shouting louder makes him right. You've lost, Jim. Not because I'm better, but because the truth is stronger than your anger. The studio exploded, the cheers deafening, and Carrey's eyes widened, his rage giving way to something like panic. The host tried to intervene, his voice strained. All right, let's wrap this up. Jim, final thoughts? But Carrey was beyond reason. He stood, his chair scraping back, his voice a snarl. I'm done with this circus. You're all blind, worshipping a con man and his mouthpiece. The audience gasped, some shouting in outrage as he tore off his mic, the cord dangling like a broken tether. Leavitt remained still, her expression calm but triumphant. Run if you want, Jim, she said, her voice steady. But you can't outrun the truth. The words were a final blow, and the crowd roared, their approval a thunderclap. Carrey stormed off the set, his footsteps heavy, the studio lights glinting off his flushed face as he disappeared into the wings. The audience was in a frenzy, some chanting Karoline, while others buzzed with shock. The host, visibly rattled, turned to Leavitt. Well, Karoline, you've certainly held your ground. Any last words? She smiled, a quiet fire in her eyes. I'm here to serve the American people and defend a president who fights for them. Tonight we showed that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand firm. The audience erupted in a standing ovation, the sound carrying her words into the night. As the cameras panned out, the set was a tableau of triumph. Leavitt's poise had turned the tide, transforming her from a young press secretary into a conservative force. Social media was already ablaze, posts hailing her as a new icon, her name trending alongside clips of Carrey's meltdown. His reputation, once bolstered by wit, now faced a reckoning, his outburst a stain on his legacy. The clash had laid bare the fault lines of a polarized nation, but in that moment, Leavitt stood tall, her voice a beacon for those who believed in her cause. The studio lights dimmed, but the story of that night would burn bright, a testament to the power of conviction in the face of chaos.